Perfect. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for showing up today to Afros and Audio. This has been an incredible weekend already. And again, I am so blessed to be here. And once again, I do have a fantastic co-host with me today. So I just want to introduce myself really quickly, and then I can throw it off to my beautiful co-host as we move forward here. I am Elsie Escobar. I'm a 15-year veteran in the podcasting industry and an inductee of the Academy Podcasters Hall of Fame. I'm co-founder of She Podcast and a podcasting community for women and non-binary that currently has now over 20,000 members to it, which is pretty fantastic. We have a podcast and a conference corresponding with that. I am also Libsyn's community manager, and I co-host and co-produce, or actually I am the producer of the feed, the official Libsyn podcast as well. I'm a podcasting advocate, pundit, and mentor to primarily women podcast leaders. And my thing is really driving dialogue in the podcasting industry, focusing on podcast impact and on society and culture, as well as their power to drive social change. And my amazing co-host for today is Miss Nikita Burks-Hale. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I am Nikita Burks-Hale, and I am a journeyer in all sense of the word. I started my business, Journey Girl Magic Productions, in August of 2019 after I launched my own podcast and realized just how much voices of color were/still are needed in the podcasting world. So my business is centered around supporting those voices through launch, alignment, and strategy coaching. So that way they feel supported so they can bring their voices to the masses. And what we're going to do today in these 20-ish minutes is we are going to be talking about those things we wish we would have known when we started podcasting. And the point of it is to give you some technical as well as some general holistic things to think about. My whole thing, the thing I teach, the thing I talk about, my mantra, all that good stuff, is that podcasting isn't just something you do, it is a part of who you are. And so you need to make sure that it feels good. So we're going to be, like I said, balancing the technical and the feel good. So with that, I think we are ready to jump right in.
I know. And we're going to actually start right off the gap with really looking at the foundations. Foundations from almost anything is the most important thing that we take a look at today. And one of the first things to pay attention to, and I know that you know, as a seasoned podcaster, anybody who's just starting out to somebody who's, already been doing this for a long time, artwork specs, and I'm talking the specifics of the way that you create the artwork itself, is possibly the number one issue for your RSS feed to have problems in most podcast directories. So whenever you speak to your podcast host, let's say your show is not updating in insert, Apple Podcast or Spotify or Google Podcast or anything like that, if there's something a little wonky with your feed, generally speaking, and almost 99% of the time, it has to do with one of these specs being a little bit off. And I know it seems really like, what are you talking about? But in absolute honesty, this is the biggest thing. And even if you come back to the support teams and you go, but I've been doing this for 3 years and there's never been a problem and I haven't changed my artwork. Well, you kind of got away with it. It's sort of like, yeah, I was going to say it's sort of like when you try to get away with like some kind of horrible crime. But no, it's not like that. It's like, it's just you made a little mistake and you kind of got away with it because I didn't know. But Nikita, could you just let us know what these specs are?
Yes, of course. So like Elsie was saying, these are those little tidbits, those little technical things that can catch you up. So making sure that when you are submitting, when you have your podcast, that the artwork, especially those specs, are between 1400 by 1400 for the minimum pixels or 3000 by 3000 maximum. And depending on what software, what thing you use, if you're using, say, Canva, then you would want to choose cover art, and that will automatically space it in the way and put it in the type of specs that you need. Must be square. So no rectangles, no circles. I know some folks, well, I want to stand out. That's what your voice is for. Use other ways to stand out. So making sure that your artwork, your cover art, is square, and that it really needs to be under 500 kilobytes. You really have to pay attention to that when exporting in Canva, because Canva can change that depending on the size of the image, or if you're doing high quality or low. So making sure that you are paying attention to that when you're working in Canva or any type of graphics software. Make sure you use sRGB color space, which means none of the transparent background, because it may flip the colors and whatnot. And then finally, JPEG or PNG files only. So again, keeping those basic foundational things. Take a picture of the slide if you would like, but when you are just launching or relaunching, these are those foundational things that you'll find very helpful. Alrighty, so kind of going back to the second thing, which is encoding. How this should, I call it the language of all of the things that we're sending to our hosting site. And so the definition of coding or encoding is that when you're really exporting your audio as an MP3, because MP3 is and must be the most widely supported format among all of the others. It's the one that takes up the least amount of space. And I think I am jumping ahead a little bit. So I know that these are the talking about MP3, but Elsie, is there a more definite definition that you want to give us?
Yeah, when it comes to encoding, it's really just transferring one media file into another media file. And the majority, if you want to take it to its bare minimum, it's kind of taking uncompressed and compressed files. That's what we kind of understand a little bit more. You understand that, let's say you're taking a picture, there can be raw data, right? That's a huge file. Or if you're taking HD, 4K, right? The file for that TV show or whatever is giant, but then you can also compress it into a much smaller file so people can download it. Same thing is for audio. So the uncompressed files are like AIFF or WAV or FLAC, those are very, very big files. And then when we compress them, right, we allow them to be smaller so that our audience can easily be able to consume that content. That's essentially what encoding is. And it's just about creating a smaller file. But Nikita was just talking about, just continue on with that MP3 information there, because that's really the most widely used.
Exactly.
Sure.
So thank you for that definition and kind of centering that. And so MP3 is the most widely used. So if you have a file that is WAV or any of the others, there are plenty of different types of software that can translate that file for you to MP3. What it does, as we were saying, is it shrinks it so that it's not as big, it doesn't take as much bandwidth, and that it's being able to be read quickly and easily. If your editing software provides a VBR, which is the variable bitrate checkbox, make sure that you don't select it. Because when you do that, it changes how the different players and systems are going to scan your file, and many are not going to be compatible with it. So if there is that checkbox, do not check it. It can cause your file to play incorrectly on many systems. So that may cause errors when you're saying, I see my podcast, but it's not playing. It has to do with that encoding. So being able to go change it to an MP3 file, re-upload, and that should fix that issue.
Yeah, just to iterate on that a little bit more, a lot of the stuff that happens too whenever you're using VBR and you don't know that this is a thing, is that sometimes you're playing your show in Apple Podcast or Google Podcast or something, and then all of a sudden your podcast just stops playing at a specific time, or it doesn't finish playing. It's like the end has been cut off, but your file is okay. It's fine. And it usually, when you look back, or if we look back at the encoding of the file, VBR, it has variable bitrate to it. So that's why constant bitrate is so important. The majority of DAW, or digital audio workstations, have the option to do this already. And when you're exporting it out, it really is like a little checkbox. And some of them don't check it for you. So you should be fine most of the time. But there are some here and there where they are checked without you knowing. So just make sure that you do that when you export your file out at the end. Again, most of the time it's not, but sometimes there's a possibility that this is happening for your show. So just to keep an eye out on that kind of stuff. All right. And then now, video podcasting has been super famous as of late. Everybody's been talking about video podcasts because Anchor released a new opportunity for a lot of folks to be able to have, they're taking signups, if you will, or like being on a waiting list to be able to show a video for your podcast as well. Video podcast has historically been a part of the podcasting space from the beginning. In fact, way back when it started, it literally was a thing. And Libsyn, the company that I work for and sponsor of Offers and Audio, has always supported video podcast ever since back in the day. So a lot of podcast hosts do already support videos, and we just wanted to make sure that you knew exactly what this was for yourself, so that you knew what to kind of do this time whenever you're using or you're uploading your videos to a podcast feed from possibly the podcast host that you have that supports them. So let's see. Right here we have an MP3, obviously, MP3 was before the audio podcast. MP4 is what's compatible with the greatest number of podcast directories here. M4V is also widely used, but MP4 is more common by far. Now, even having 720p or higher is what we suggest. Mind you, video resolutions depend on where you will distribute your show. But for podcast apps, we try to keep it smaller, because you have to remember that a lot of folks are going to be essentially consuming their content on their phone. So downloading a gigantic file is going to be a little bit more challenging for them. So, which actually brings me down to size versus quality. You have to understand that even though you feel you need to have the largest HD file for your video, consider your audience, because a lot of times people are going to be downloading this into their devices, and sometimes it might take much longer, and it's going to be a bad user experience, as well as you're keeping in mind folks that maybe don't have unlimited resources or unlimited data plans to be able to at least compress it to maybe just 720p instead of like good, beautiful, like HD of the highest quality, just because we always need to make sure that our podcasts have access. At least in my book, that's something that we really need to really focus on. Oops, it went away into the other one. Did it really? Let me see. Let us see what had happened. Oh, and then these are the podcasts that support video podcasts. Actually, they play video. The ones on the left-hand side, you can see not all of them support video podcasts. So Apple Podcast does. You can actually read the list. I'm not going to go ahead and read that. Those are the ones that actually play the video. But the ones on the right-hand side, those play the audio from the video. So even if you spend all of this time trying to make sure that folks are watching your video, the ones on the right-hand side, they're only going to be able to listen to your podcast. They're not going to be able to watch it, even though you can still put it out there. And there are also quite a few that don't support video at all. So you also have to understand, if you are going to be doing a video podcast, essentially you are keeping your audience smaller-ish to be able to consume the video part of it as those that are on the left-hand side.
Yeah, and one more thing about all of the first 3 or so slides is, whether you're just starting thinking about doing a podcast or you've been in it for a while, remember that folks are tuning in to listen to what you have to say. So don't messy it up, don't gray it up with all of these big things. It really all comes down to your voice. Let go of the smoke and mirrors, focus on why you're podcasting, what's important about your voice, your message, and bring that again to the masses. And so all of this stuff is important, but if this is stopping you from launching a podcast, grab your mic, grab your computer, grab some headphones, and that be it, and just get started.
So truth right there, man.
Yes. And with that said, when you get started, make sure that you press record. I would say I know very, very few people who have not been in that situation where they've done this amazing interview or recorded an amazing podcast for themselves and look over and don't see that red light. And you're like, crap, like I just did this amazing experience and I forgot to press record. And so it seems simple, but I would say 9.5 times out of 10, at some point in your podcasting career, you will start recording, or you will start talking and not record. So make sure that you actually press record.
I know. And it seems, it really crazy seems like it's the lamest thing ever for us to say, but I can tell you that if you don't give yourself a reminder, you are going to be so sad at some point. And then you're going to go, I remember when Nikita and Elsie talked about this. I should have listened. So here we go. All right. And on that note, yes, you can change the name of your show and description and artwork really, really easily. This is a question I know Nikita and I get all the time where, you know, it's like, oh no, should I make it blue or should I make it pink? Or should I have this show be named this or should it be named that? Or or should I change my podcast description to this or that? And it sometimes hinders people taking action, or they become so afraid of changing things up, thinking they're going to lose so much. And technically speaking, this is one of the easiest changes that you can do to podcasts. It's so easy. You can literally go into your podcast host's dashboard, whatever the back end is there, and just change it right there. And it just automatically gets updated everywhere. So there really isn't any technical bad stuff that happens if you change these things. In fact, you can change it all the time. I've known many people who have rebranded their shows, changed their name, kept it the same, but just made it visually different throughout many times, not just one time. And you just keep iterating on it. So never be afraid of that. But I know Nikita has something more to share about this for you.
Yes, there's this big however in the back of my brain of, yes, this is super simple to do. And also, is usually what I say is, think about why you are changing it. Oftentimes people say, well, I feel like I'm going to lose my audience. I need to keep changing it. When that may be the reason that you feel like the audience is being lost, is because you're changing so much. So consistency is one of the key things all the time. Rain, shine, unless you really need a break, just do what you're doing. The people will show up, they will be there. So yes, you can change the name of your show and your description and artwork really easily, but put some thought into it before you do that.
All right. Looking at this wonderful time now, Miss Nikita, we're talking about downloads and growth, which everybody really wants to talk about all the time.
Yes.
So, I know, moving on to some data. Take it away, Nikita.
All righty. So this is really important to just bring it down, because we think that by episode 10, we have to have thousands of downloads so we can get all of the sponsors, when I love to have these real moments and say, like, look, the median download number, meaning majority of the podcasts out there, get 148 downloads per episode. I will say it again. The average amount of downloads per episode for podcasts out there is 148. So if your episodes are getting over that, over 136 downloads after 30 days, then you are doing better than half of the shows out there. That is something just to keep as a frame of reference. It is not what it is all about. And so it says 148, but mid-August through the end of September, that number actually shifted a bit to 136. And so that source comes from Libsyn servers with over 75,000 accounts in October of 2021. So.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Nikita, because I messed this up for you. That's my fault.
No worries.
So 148 is the October number, and I completely forgot to change because it was 136 in September, and I just got the numbers like literally yesterday.
Nice.
So I changed the first number and not the second number. So alas. I am so sorry. That is my fault to making her sound that way. So it is 148, but everything else that Nikita said is right on point, which means that if anybody's getting above 148, you are better than half the shows in the Libsyn servers, which is 75,000 or more. And below that, it is 148. So you get an opportunity to see that. And now moving on to average CPM, because there's a lot of folks that are really looking to monetize their podcast. And within the podcasting industry, there is a little bit of a jargon. It's called CPM, and that is kind of how you get paid for whenever you have sponsorship. And where I'm talking just in terms of industry standard, right? This is the like business speak out there. And CPM is translated to cost per mil, and mil equals 1,000. So generally speaking, you are paid. This is the average as of, I believe the source data is in October 2021, and it's $23.33. And that means that generally every month, like you get paid for 1,000 downloads Whenever you get 1,000, you get $23.33. And so if you have more than that, obviously if you have 2,000, you would get $46.66. And generally this is paid per month. And it's often not based on your latest episode, or excuse me, it is based on your latest episode, not on your total download. So don't think that you're going to now do math with your entire podcast download experience or history. It's more about being able to get paid for your latest episode. So you can do the math on that. There's a lot of us who are not really even making 1,000 downloads per episode per month. So we're barely going to be even making $23.33. So if you start to think about it from that perspective, oh my gosh, it makes you feel a little bit crazy. But again, you do you, right, Nikita? You do you.
Exactly. And really thinking about it in terms of growth. So if we go to that next slide, when we're talking about, we have the money for downloads, but now we're really going to break it down into growth. So expect 1 to 3% growth each month. So if we're giving that a real life example, if you have 100 podcast listeners, and I say expect download growth of 1 to 3%, that means expect an increase of 1 to 3 listeners per month. My math is correct on that, correct? Awesome, great. And that is important to know because it sets your expectations.
Correct.
And there are also other areas of growth. And so this is just one. There's also your email list. There's also your social media. There's also folks who respond and say, your podcast changed my life. It's not always all about the numbers. Let's look at it again holistically. The downloads are one thing. The number of listeners is another. Your email is another. Shout outs and sharing is another. These are all coming together to represent the bigger picture of growth as a podcaster.
Absolutely. And now heading on to some truth here. So we get into our last two main key points. And this one over here is very important to a lot of people. No, you will not be able to find out how many subscribers or listeners you have in your podcast, no matter what service or platform or provider say. I'm sorry, but this is not going to be happening, and might as well get that into your head there. So listens, downloads, subscribers, followers, all of that is essentially, everybody calls it differently. Podcast hosting providers, advertising platforms, podcast apps, they all have a different name for the same thing. It's essentially the same thing most of the time. And no, you cannot get comprehensive data on all of this stuff. Apple Podcast doesn't talk to Spotify, Spotify doesn't talk to YouTube, et cetera, and so forth. And so you do have to go into all of these different places to compile that data so that you can gather it for yourself. But again, Nikita has something really key here, right at the end of setting yourself as the data.
Exactly, because there's so many different data points. Let's focus on the one that you know is consistent, that you know best, and that is yourself. Like I said before, who are you connecting with? Who are the folks who are really listening? What is the feedback you're getting from your podcast? These are the things that are going to set you going forward. You know in your gut, whether when you release an episode, it feels good and the feedback you're getting from it. So making sure you just use yourself to start out with. And as you grow and expand, you can look into those other areas.
Absolutely. All right. Nikita, you want to take us into this last one?
And so there is no tool that works 100% of the time. We are reminded of that with technology every single day in some way, shape, or form. And so at some point they will all fail except for one. And that one thing is you. Don't only focus on the first 9 things and then forget about yourself. Don't always focus on the sponsors and the downloads and the technical things. Focus on yourself. And this gets into what I'm all about. Talk about and think about what feels good for you. What is that message that you have been dying to talk about that got you started in podcasts in the first place? Start there, in there. Every single podcast episode that you release should start and end with you. And again, should feel good, should feel like you're getting good information and your message across.
Perfect. And now I think we've finished all of our little thing here, Miss Nikita. We get an opportunity to go there, and you can connect with us right here. I actually added into the chat a PDF of these tips that we covered here. They have a tiny little bit more context inside of them, but it's just a 3-page PDF that you can scan through, and it's got all of these data points for you to take with you at any time, so you get an opportunity to check that out. But yes, I think that we've got that. If you want to connect with either both of us, you can see here. Or Nikita, are you around? Would you be open to getting some DMs or to talking about your products here for a moment?
Oh, definitely. So I do have for Black Friday, there's going to be our Small Business Saturday more so. There is a podcast season in review for podcasters to really reflect on their season and to plan for the upcoming one. So that'll be dropping in a couple of weeks. And that's that code for that. We are both going to be around in the app for the rest of the day in some way, shape, or form. So I know we don't have time for questions here, but if you have questions, simply go to in the Hoover app, our specific session, drop those questions, and we'll get those answers for you. Because I would say me and Elsie love to connect with folks. That's kind of where our energy comes from and is drained, if I'm quite honest. So would love to connect with everyone and answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And for sure, if anybody has any questions for Libsyn specifically, you can go over to the Libsyn booth, and I'm using little hand quotes there, and we can answer some questions there if you have any of that stuff. You can also use the code AA Festival for up to 2 months free using our service. But we will be here for just a few more minutes answering questions if they come out there, and feel free to download this. And Nikita, thank you so much for sharing the stage with me today. You're amazing.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you both, Elsie and Nikita. And thank you everyone for joining, for attending the Libsyn If Only I'd Known 10 Tips for a Successful Podcasting session. We appreciate everybody's patience at the outset, but know that the entire presentation has been recorded and will be available for replay. And I really appreciate you both making yourselves available to us as a community afterwards, because I know I have a bunch of questions. I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, everybody have a good day.